Now that we've had opportunity to take a look at how IREC's model interconnection procedures have evolved over the last 20 plus years, we're going to take a look at how IREC has tracked individual states and how well they have stayed current with best practices. We're going to start by taking a look at the 2023 results of Freeing the Grid, which are available here at freeingthegrid.org. Freeing the Grid has been around since 2007 when the first edition was published, and is a joint collaboration between IREC and Vote Solar, another national nonprofit focused on helping to expand access to clean energy. As we can recall, 2007 was a really important time in the development of interconnection policies around the country. The Energy Act of 2005 had suggested to states that they complete adoption of interconnection standards in their state by 2007. So starting in 2007, we have this historical record to show how states did in adopting effective interconnection procedures that were aligned with national best practices. These reports also include a historical record of net metering policies in states around the country. We're not going to get into that in this course, but if it's something that you're interested in, you can look through these historical resources to see how net metering policies have changed in each state over the years. Looking here at the 2023 edition, if we hover over states, we can see with each state the interconnection score that they received from IREC in this edition of Freeing the Grid. We can also get an overview if we go to key takeaways and interconnection key takeaways. You can see here a map that shows a state-by-state breakdown of where interconnection procedures in those states compare to national best practices at this time. Now you can see here in 2023, New Mexico was the only state to receive an A. We have a few, California, Arizona, Illinois, Michigan, New York, that received Bs. There are a number of states shown here in orange that received Cs. The pink states received Ds. These are largely states that adopted interconnection procedures early. Like you can see, Delaware is a pink state, but haven't updated them in a very long time. And then finally, the states that are colored red received an F in Freeing the Grid, meaning that they haven't adopted formal interconnection rules and therefore leave it at the discretion of the utilities. These grades are an indication of how well the rules that are on the books compare with national best practices. This is not necessarily a measure of how well interconnection is going in that state. So you may have some instances in which interconnection is going pretty well. So for instance, Hawaii got a C in Freeing the Grid, but the utility HECO actually in 2023 was performing better than what was required on the books. That tends to be an exception versus the rule. In a lot of states, it's the interconnection procedures that are driving utilities towards compliance. So what ends up happening in those states can be the reverse of Hawaii, where there may be good grades on the books, but if the utilities aren't complying with those procedures and the commission isn't enforcing them, there's a chance that a state could have a good grade and interconnection could be not going so well in that state. So what IREC evaluates here is how strong are the enforceable rules that are on the books? How well do they comply with national best practices? Going back to the home page allows us to go to each individual state and then find out more information on that state. So let's say that we went to New York. By clicking on New York, we can go to the state page to get more details of how IREC arrived at a grade of B. On the right-hand side, you can see the criteria used by IREC to evaluate the state. These categories include rule applicability. So do the rules cover all of the state jurisdictional DERs? You see things related to IEEE 1547 and whether those have been adopted. Things related to streamlined review, so having various review pathways to help streamline interconnection, and then having good screens for doing that initial review to avoid projects going to a detailed study process. This includes things like simplified and fast track processes. How well are the modifications designed? So these may be modifications to the DER or modifications to the grid. How well are those things delineated in terms of what is acceptable for modifications to an application before it has to go back and start the process all over? And are there certain thresholds related to the types of modifications in the distribution system that have larger impact and will require deeper studies versus those that are smaller and may not need those? Other categories include supplemental review. So this is the process for a project that fails screens for simplified or fast track review. This is a kind of a light engineering study before it goes to a full-blown engineering study. In some states, these are prescriptively laid out in terms of what the utility will evaluate, and others it's left to the discretion of the utility. You can see here that New York gets a check mark, meaning that it does have supplemental review screens that align with national best practices. Versus modifications, a red X means that there's some improvement here towards clarifying what types of modifications are allowable, or the definition of thresholds to modifications of the distribution system and how they're treated for different DERs. Then some of the last criteria here have to do with timelines and efficiency. So are there enforceable timelines that are reasonable? Data sharing and reporting. So this comes down to queue reporting. This comes down to pre-application reports, etc. What types of interconnection costs and requirements? So are application fees reasonable? Are study costs reasonable? And then finally, dispute resolution. How streamlined is the dispute resolution process? So with the 2023 version of Freeing the Grid, you can go in and get a snapshot of each particular state. You can download this as a PDF. I won't click on that right now, but you can go ahead and follow that on your own. And then there are some recommendations for the high-level changes that would likely have the most impact if enacted in this state to improve and streamline DER interconnection. Going back, there are a number of other things that you can take a look at if you want to dig into it, information on how states are graded. So there's a number of different details here and what those grades mean. So if your state got a D, for instance, you could take a look at it and say, oh, the state has not adopted a majority of the interconnection best practices and should plan to significantly update its interconnection procedures. As you look through each of these, it can help provide further detail. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at Freeing the Grid in the past? So 2023 was similar to the previous two versions of Freeing the Grid, in which all of the information was presented on a website. But the earliest versions of Freeing the Grid were actually these reports, the first one being in 2007, that provide a significant amount of detail related to both interconnection policy and net metering policy. A lot of information that's in these that provides a really great historical record for us to review. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that each state was graded based on its net metering policies and its interconnection policies. There are details related to how those grades came to be. What I like about these reports, if you scroll down far enough and get past the scoring methods, it will show state snapshots that really summarize the various details of each policy. So for instance, in Arizona, I can see that in 2007, there weren't net metering policies on the books. There were interconnection policies that scored a B, and this talks about the eligible technologies, the applicable sectors, whether there were special rules for net metered systems versus those that are not net metered, any limits on size, etc. This is a great opportunity to go back if you're interested in the more nuanced history of your state's interconnection regulations to get a sense of where things were and how things evolved. If you take a look, you can see in the course there are reports for 2008, 2009, continuing up to 2013. And again, 2013, this is when IREC produced an updated model interconnection procedures, and when FERC last had a substantive update of their small generator interconnection procedures. In 2015 and 2017, these were done in website form, and these websites don't exist anymore, but you can get a screenshot here of just the grades. So for 2015 and 2017, you're only going to be able to see a high level overview. It's not going to get into the criteria and how each state did. But by using these, especially looking at a specific state, this can really help provide a clean overview of how things have evolved in your state over time.